welcome everyone to week 10 of COVID class. It seems really difficult to me to believe that we're at week 10 already. In some ways, this feels like it has flown past, and in some other ways, it feels like the summer has been a very long summer, the long part of it not related to this class, though. And I was joking with Dr. Newton, I feel like week 10, I have finally gotten a setup where I'm happy with my camera and my lighting, and now we're about finished. But we're not quite finished. So I want to hand it over to Dr. Newton to talk a little bit about how we want to wrap up everything that has happened over the summer.
Oh, wow. Yes. So we're not quite ready to let go of you yet. Technically, at the end of this week, the class is over for those of you who are taking it for credit. But we hope to keep you around to entice you into just one more week of joining us live like this. Dr. Fisher and I, in thinking about everything that we've talked about, have identified a couple of things that we wish that we could have covered in retrospect. One of them is the intersection of this current pandemic with the criminal justice system. And fortunately, we've recruited Dr. Robert Stallings to join us here next week to talk a little bit about how the pandemic has played out in our criminal justice system, particularly outbreaks in prisons and jails as particular hotspots. So he's going to join us for a little bit next week. And then Dr. Fisher and I are going to take some points of privilege to talk about our own perspectives on the class, try to tie some themes together that we've seen running throughout the class. And then we're hoping to try something new. So look for a new link from us for the Zoom meeting next week. It's not going to be this webinar style. Instead, it'll be a regular Zoom meeting, which means for those of you who want to, everybody can join us with video, and then maybe we can have more of an interaction with one another in this class than has been possible up to this point. And that's how we hope to end this journey with you.
But for tonight, we're going to use the format that we've been using for the past 9 weeks. Yes, past 9 weeks. We'll have an introduction of our guests tonight, and then we will hand things over to Dr. Kerrie Fuenfhausen, who will be talking with us for 10 or 15 minutes, following up on the materials that she so graciously provided for us who are in the Canvas, that were in the Canvas site. And after that, we'll open it up for kind of conversation. We'll probably begin with a couple of questions that the panelists have had. But we welcome, encourage, invite your questions in the Q&A in the webinar format. So as we have said every week, we won't get to all of those questions. It doesn't mean it was a bad question or that we didn't want to. It's just that we get a lot of them, and we are trying to kind of weave them into conversation and all of that good stuff. So know that your questions are very much appreciated, even if we don't get to them. So who are our guests tonight, Dr. Newton?
Well, I'm thrilled to welcome them both. Dr. Kerrie Fuenfhausen is an associate professor in the School of Counseling at Lenoir-Rhyne University and has served as the counseling program coordinator at the Asheville campus since it opened in August of 2012. So this is a special thrill for us because we don't get to interact with our Asheville colleagues terribly much like it was when Dr. Mary Shore joined us a few weeks ago. She's in Columbia, and we have these 3 campuses, but it's hard sometimes to get together. So this is really exciting for us to join our campuses together today. Dr. Fuenfhausen earned her master's and doctoral degrees both from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Dr. Fuenfhausen's counseling experience includes working with individuals, couples, and families in private practice, community agencies, and hospital settings. And her clinical and scholarly interests include relationship satisfaction, parenting issues, stress and coping, personal growth, and identity development, as well as relational processes in clinical supervision and emotionally focused couples therapy. All of those sound highly relevant to everything that's like going on, right? Dr. Fuenfhausen is a nationally certified counselor and a licensed clinical mental health counselor and supervisor. She serves on the editorial board of the Family Journal and is founding member and coordinator of the Asheville Area Counseling Professionals Association. So yay, Dr. Fuenfhausen. And also joining us here this evening is Dr. Dominique Hammonds. She is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Human Development and Counseling Psychology at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. And right before this, we were just talking about how we needed to have more up the mountain, down the mountain kind of collaboration. So yay, look at all of us coming together here this evening. This is great. She earned her PhD in counseling from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and her master's in clinical mental health counseling from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. She's a licensed clinical mental health counselor, just like Dr. Fuenfhausen, a qualified supervisor, national certified counselor, and board certified telemedical health provider. And Dr. Hammonds is currently the president-elect of the North Carolina Counseling Association, and she is the recipient of the 2017 Creativity, Innovation, and Counseling Award and the 2018 ACES Supervision Award. She's passionate about increasing mental health awareness among communities of color and increasing access to quality, culturally responsible mental health care in a global society. Her scholarship and professional service activities center around a variety of subjects, including culturally responsive teaching, counseling and clinical supervision, creative teaching and supervision methods, and very applicable here today, technology and counseling. So we have two guests with us here today who are bringing a lot to the table. By the way, I'm a psychologist too, but I'm not the kind that helps people, right? So Dr. Fuenfhausen and Dr. Hammonds are the kind who actually work with people and communities and help them. I just do research. So different kind of an approach to psychology that we'll be dealing with tonight.
Some of us might take issue with that claim. You help people in a different way.
True. True. Indirectly, yes, absolutely. Oh, I forgot to mention. Oh my goodness, let me share my screen because check this out. Dr. Hammonds is the cover story of the current issue of Counseling Today. She's featured here in this article. So the July 2020 issue of Counseling Today, which is a big deal. And here she is with us here tonight. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Fuenfhausen and Dr. Hammonds. And to get us started, Dr. Fuenfhausen is going to dig a little bit more into counseling in the context of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fisher and Dr. Newton. I'm glad to be here. I will start off with a little self-disclosure that at multiple points over the last couple of weeks in getting ready for this, I thought, I don't really think I'm the one to talk about this because I have my own struggles with dealing with the pandemic and my own parenting stress and my own trying to figure out how I'm going to juggle everything when school starts here in a few weeks and my own breakdowns. And, but I, as I think it was clear in the materials that I put out, that's actually a big part of what I hope is the takeaway is that we are all, globally and nationally and in our different North Carolina communities, dealing with this. There really is a, I wouldn't even call it a low grade, I would call it a high grade hum of collective anxiety and grief and crisis around this. Yes, people may be responding in different ways and at different intensity levels and have different emotional reactions or ways of managing it, but I think it's safe to say that we're all struggling in different ways to try to figure out how to navigate this pandemic and all of the direct and indirect ways that it might be affecting us. So one thing that I wanted to mention is that, well, a big takeaway also that I hope is just to normalize for us all. And not only for in order to have some patience and flexibility and grace for ourselves, but also for the people around us. So in my case, that's students, that's clients, that's colleagues, that's my husband and my almost 3 and almost 6-year-old, and my friends and my extended family, and to recognize not only to give myself some grace when it feels like it's all just too much and that there's too many balls in the air that I'm trying to juggle. But also to have some grace for them when they're responding in ways that might not be the same as how I'm responding, but are still understandable nonetheless. In the counseling field, part of our professional philosophy is to view mental and emotional struggles through a developmental lens. And what that means is to say, this person is experiencing some depression or some anxiety or some grief or fill in the blank, whatever it might be. And rather than seeing that as an abnormal response to a normal event or an experience, seeing it actually as a pretty normal response to maybe abnormal events or experiences. I think what we're experiencing right now is abnormal. It's unusual. We didn't expect it. There was nothing we could have, okay, government-wise, there were things to prepare for, but individually, there's nothing that I could have done to prepare myself for Wednesday, March 11th or 13th or whatever that was, when everything seemed to start falling from the sky. And so recognizing that we're all doing the best we can, and with some pretty unusual, unprecedented events. What was my next point here? I also think that part of having empathy for others and offering flexibility and grace is recognizing that one of the ways or some of the ways that we all may be responding differently is based on our context and our financial resources, our emotional and support resources, whether or not someone has a history of trauma or some cumulative stress and grief, whether they're at a greater risk physically for having more severe physical impacts if they were to get the COVID infection. So people may be dealing with different levels of fear and worry. So I think just recognizing that all of those factors may impact how someone is responding to this pandemic, and it's important that we offer that grace and empathy. So that's really overall what I hope are the takeaways, and we can spend the next 45 minutes or so talking about some of the more specific details of the what and the how and the who that it may be impacting more. But those are really my hopes for the takeaways.
It helps to unmute yourself when you talk. I just remembered. Thank you so much for that. I'm wondering if a question that I have, you just said we can talk a little bit more about the who and the what and all that stuff. And the one thing in the readings that felt like it kept coming up over and over again are children. And I wonder if that might be a good place for us to start. I know there was that wonderful moment in your video when you paused for the parenting, which I just loved. I am so happy to work at a place where it feels like that's acceptable and appropriate. And I've got my kids here, and I'm struggling with them. So I wonder if the two of you might talk a little bit about the toll that this is taking on children, and maybe before we get into the too close up level, broad picture, what do you see happening with this whole thing for the nation's children?
That's a big question, and I'm not sure that I can answer it in quite that big of a way, but I also want to just say, me too. I'm struggling with my kids too, and there was a moment, well, many moments, but a moment that I recall a couple of months ago saying, I'm an extrovert, so that's a part of what is missing for me right now in the ways that I typically am interacting and connecting with people on a social level. But so I'm feeling the disconnect and want and craving connection. And at the same time, I am so sick of everybody in my house. And I really just want to do a house swap with somebody else without kids in a house that is nice and clean and quiet. And
actually move my office to outside on the back deck to get away from everyone so that I have a quiet workspace. But it's quiet.
Maybe like a literal bubble, like those, like you could just stick yourself inside one of those big plastic things.
All around in that.
Yeah, like a hamster wheel, right?
Anyway, that was not an answer to your question about what's happening with our kids, but I just wanted to relate there for a moment.
I'll jump in there real fast.
Please,
I relate to
do.
everything that's been said so far. I have 2 little ones myself. I have a 6-year-old and a 15-month-old. Yes, and we have been home together every single day since mid-March. So it has been a real struggle to, I won't even say balance, because I really don't like that word when we talk about, oh goodness, like work-life balance. I feel like it's a misnomer. I don't think there is a way to completely balance work and life. I look at it more of like juggling. And then, and that when you see, I don't know how to juggle, but when you see someone juggle, it's an intentionally taking your hand off of the ball to place it onto another one. And that's what I think of it as. Like, you're making the choice to give your attention to this specific set of activities or what you're doing. And then you're making a choice to leave this other thing over here on the side.
Taking turns.
Absolutely, taking turns. And I think we need to normalize that rather than putting it out there that we should be able to hold everything at the same level all the time, because I think that sets people up for failure, or at least myself. I don't know.
You know, I feel like people really got that back in March and April. So like when we were really scrambling, like right in the thick of things. Do you think there's more pressure to like have it down now that we've had we are 6 months into this sucker. Now that we've had 6 months to do whatever, like, are we expected to actually juggle?
So that's also a very difficult question, but my sense and what I'm just what I keep coming in contact with is, yeah, kind of. I think people are letting go of this idea that it's a crisis overall, and it's now just this way of life, so we should be okay with it, right?
It's still a crisis, right?
It's still a crisis.
It feels like one. Oh gosh. Okay, so it feels. Oh. Sorry, Dr. Fuenfhausen.
Were you done, Dr. Hammonds?
Go ahead.
Okay. I think one way that I'm starting to think about, I do still think of it as a crisis. I still start pretty much every conversation that I have with someone, how are you doing in this bizarre year that we're in? Like, I don't just jump in business as usual without acknowledging all of this for at least a minute or two, and then we move on. And that's with students, with clients, with colleagues, with friends. I mean, that's kind of with anybody that I'm coming into contact with. But one of the ways that I'm trying to start to think about how to cope and manage in this new normal that may be for another however long, I don't like thinking about that part, but is to go back to reevaluating what's urgent, what's important, what's time sensitive, what isn't. Any of what used to feel urgent that now all of a sudden is pretty easy to cross off my list and say that ain't gonna happen. And I feel like I've gotten better at not only saying that to myself, but to I don't know that I've been asked to do a lot of extra things this week. I did say yes to doing this week, but I feel like I've been a little bit better about saying no, that I'm really kind of having to focus on what is really urgent or time sensitive for my family or my students right now. And I don't really have a lot of extra bandwidth for things. And so, yes, maybe we need to be starting to figure out, okay, how can I do these pieces that have to get done in my life? How can I do them a little bit more effectively? But I still think that it's okay to be setting the boundaries, and I don't know, for many of us who are high achievers and perfectionists and have a pretty high standard for ourselves, I also am trying and talking with the people in my circle about, I don't know, maybe I can lower my standards a little bit with what I expect of myself, and offer people around me that same grace.
Sure. Yeah.
Can we circle? Oh, go ahead. If you were going to circle back, I was going to take it somewhere else. So let's circle first, and then we can go
about kids. Just a little bit more about children. So about a month ago, my 7-year-old said, "Can we stop watching, or can we stop listening to the news? I feel really sad." And I felt so bad when he articulated that, because I hadn't even realized, like, I had like NPR on in the background, like when I'm making breakfast or something like that. I didn't even realize that he was listening. But he was. And then it made me kind of think about my own information consumption. And we joked way back in week 3 with Dr. Delbert and Dr. Reddy, when we were talking about misinformation and communication, like there's something to finding boundaries around that. Can you talk a little bit about how to navigate information on behalf of children who we may be taking care of, as well as for ourselves? Is there a connection to mental health?
Dr. Hammonds or me?
I'll let you take it first.
Okay. My initial thought around that is that it kind of depends on the age of the child and what is developmentally appropriate for them to be able to handle, and maybe even personality-wise able to handle. My almost 6-year-old has already, she's a little prone to anxietize about things. And I used that, it's not really a verb, but I used that intentionally.
The English professor says it's okay.
She's a little prone to like go big with things and let it, I mean, sometimes it's a way of, prolonging bedtime, but sometimes it really is a legitimate fear or worry that she has. And so while we've been honest about, yes, there's a sickness going around, and yes, it's not just here, it's also in Florida where grandma is, and it's also in Indiana where Aunt Julie is. And yes, it is all these places. And these are the things we're doing to keep us safe. And we try to speak in a really matter-of-fact, neutral tone of voice. And so we're being honest, but we're also not adding any extra information that might keep her up at night. Now, I don't have older kids, but I could imagine that being a little different conversation with a teenager. I'll just, stop there. I could imagine that being a different conversation, and a learning opportunity, and an opportunity to even look at a wellness wheel, like was the assignment for this week, to say, okay, this jumps a little bit maybe to another question, so I can maybe, I don't know, another question I think was around just screen time and like what the heck are we doing with all of this time that needs to get filled up. And I think involving kids at different levels, depending on their age and developmental level, involving them in conversations about how are we going to get your needs met. You need to get some exercise. You need to connect with your friends in some way, even if it's different than it used to be. You need to get, good sleep. We need to, let's think about all these different things that you need that help you to be a well-rounded person, and kind of brainstorm together some creative ways of getting those needs met. I don't know if that was a tangent or still.
I want to ask about getting those needs met, because one of the articles that you asked us to read suggested that when we're facing grief, I really liked the discussion of COVID-19 as grief, that we need to gather the support mechanisms to help us cope with it. And yet, if I'm honest, I will say that probably the biggest things that I am grieving are the lack of the support mechanisms that help me cope. So,
Right.
And maybe I can combine two questions with one here. How do we deal with that? And then as practitioners, how do you deal with that, especially given that you are a support mechanism that is now distant? I can't probably just get an appointment with you and come into your office and sit down and talk like we normally would in any kind of therapy. We're doing it from a distance, and both of those things I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I think we can. Oh, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that just came up for me was how the grieving process, of course, is going to look different for every person, and depending on your context. But recognize that the grieving process is not going to be something that we speed through in a week or a couple of weeks. We are really, I say we, but we are really grieving the loss of life as we know it. And I hope I'm not being, over the top with that type of language. But if you really step back and think of it, that's what's happened. Every part of our life has changed. And so that's going to be something that we just have to give ourselves the space and grace to grieve, and to not to put expectations on it. So it's not going to look the way that it might look for loss of something else. And that's okay. So I don't know that helps with coping per se, but I think of it as helping us reframe the experience a bit, and just to normalize it and say, this is oh my goodness, that phrase, this is unprecedented. We are living in unprecedented times. How many times we've heard that over the past, what do you say? Someone said 6 months. Has it really been 6 months? I guess it has, but yeah, we are living in unprecedented times. So this is going to feel and look different than any other process that we've experienced. And our children are experiencing it too. So as I was listening to the discussion about children, one thing that came up for me, and I'll hop back for just a second, it was around control. I'm an adult. We're all adults on this call, and I'll speak for myself here. I absolutely feel a lack of control. I feel like there's so little that I can control right now in this experience, in the way how things have changed, in the way that my life might look like in the fall, and how I am worried and just really fearful for the people around me and the people that I know, my friends. So I can't control any of that. Imagine how our children feel, right? So how do we, and this is maybe a question to all of us to kind of open up the conversation, but how do we help our children, or how do we help our children acknowledge that lack of control and really, I don't know if we can either sit with it or help reframe it in a way, because of course, like Dr. Fuenfhausen said, she mentioned that we don't want to add to that experience of anxiety, but we also don't want to pretend that it's not there. And I think it really gives us an opportunity to open up some discussion around what it feels like to not feel like we have control, and how can we deal with that. To acknowledge maybe there's anger there, or grief, or to show our children and really model for them, what do we do when we feel like we have no control. We laugh, this is just one quick example, but we laugh in March when they were starting to announce the shutdowns, and how everyone started to run out and get what? You remember probably toilet paper, right? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, I've got to go. Like, they're hoarding things. I got to get water, toilet paper. I got to get all this stuff. But I'm sure it's control. Folks in the mental health profession, everyone else around me was saying, I don't understand. And I said, I do. I understand why people are doing it. It's whatever you're reaching, you're grasping for a sense of control. What can I control around me? So if that means I'm going to make sure that I can hunt and gather and get all the things that I need in my space, so that I feel like I've got control over this place, this is the only thing I can control, that's what I'm going to do.
I'm on top of it.
Yep, I'm on top of it.
This piece of my life, I am on top of.
I don't got anything outside of there, but this, yeah. I got.
I think that's a really, really good point about the loss of control, and that being a kind of root piece of what a lot of us are responding to and what our anxiety and fear is about. I also think that when it comes to kids, we do have, I say we as in the field, as in parenting skills and counselors who work with kids do have skill sets to help with that very thing, you know, ideas around what choices can we give kids so that they do, you know, yes, they're directed a lot. It's time to brush your teeth. It's time to get dressed. It's time to go to, okay, not school now. It's time to do all these things. Their days are very much directed. And so it is a good parenting strategy to be intentional about saying, okay, what are some places in our day that we can give them some choices and some control? What kind of cereal do you want? What, you know, do you want this or do you want this? Would you rather go for a walk or would you rather play catch in the backyard? Would you, you know, like, so offering some choice and control where we are able to offer that can really go a long way. And same with emotion regulation skills. That's a skill that counselors and parents can teach their kids to say, when I'm feeling stressed, or anxious or scared or upset, here are some ways of managing that.
Sure. Yeah. You know, I was just thinking maybe companies could advertise more honestly by saying, like Lucky Charms, your children will have a small sense of control over their lives, or Charmin for your daily existential crises, right? Something that gets a hold of this idea.
I wonder when marketing is going to start, different products start responding to.
Right.
Anyway, did that, since Devin was the one who kind of started with the kid direction, did any of that answer some of your questions?
I think so. I think, you know, it's the distance with counselors that I'm interested in right now. I mean, I'll be that too, and I'll share in the interest of normalizing. My family's actually seeing a therapist through Zoom, and I would love to hear your thoughts on how that process is going and all this. And Dr. Hammonds, I know that the distance counseling is one of your areas of specialization, and I wonder if you could, just as a point of interest for me, and I think probably for some others, is what you specialize in different from just we're going to turn on Zoom and do this? We have this conversation all the time with our teaching, right? Like, oh, I'm doing distance teaching. Well, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it is at a distance, but as soon as you turn that camera on, something different is happening.
Absolutely.
So,
yes, thank you for acknowledging that. Yeah, I think that a lot of people think that telemental health counseling or distance counseling is as simple as hopping on Zoom or setting up a camera, and similar to the way that we would think of teaching. So when you're face to face, you are able to plan your class with specific pedagogies. And when you go online teaching, there's a different type of pedagogy that you should consider in the way students learn, andragogy, right? There's all these new considerations. The same thing for telemental health counseling. So yes, that camera introduces a new way of doing things. Although I will say that there are core similarities to the facilitation of counseling, right? I'm using similar skill sets, all the foundational skills, helping skills that we've been taught, things like that. I'm of course still using, but now considering what does this thing do to our relationship? How, like all these things about how to set it up and how to think about things like the disinhibition effect, right? Like all these things about just what sitting online does to a relationship. And now folding that into the counseling or supervision relationship, right? So there are different considerations, and I have found that I started telemental health counseling in 2011, And for me, it was an interest because I really enjoy technology. I was always the kid that whenever I saw a new gadget or tech item, I was on it. I was like, Mom, Dad, this is it. Like, I don't care if this is if you lump all the gift giving opportunities together in 1 year, this is what I want. So I was always that kid. And then I remember a discussion in my master's coursework about counseling or technology and counseling. And this was really before folks started doing it the way they are now. And it was like, oh, gasp. What? What's counseling not sitting in the same place as your client? So it's interesting to me to stand back and look at how far we've come since that point, and how there has been really a mass acceptance of doing counseling this way. Selfishly, one of the interesting byproducts, I will say, that has come out of this pandemic has been an overwhelming acceptance of telemental health counseling. I think people were still like teetering on, I'm not really sure, but at this point, everyone was kind of thrust into, I have to do this. If I'm a counselor educator, I need to understand how to do this so that my students can do this, so they can continue their coursework and continue to gain hours. If I'm practicing out in the field, this is the only way I can make money right now. So you kind of,
and for clients, if I want to see my therapist, this is the only way I can do that.
Absolutely.
Are there other advantages besides the pragmatic ones? So like, Absolutely. Does it do something for equity? Does it do something for stigmatization? Does it remove some of? Could you talk more about that?
Absolutely. So actually, some of the research says that younger clients tend to feel more comfortable in this type of setting. And I wonder why. They probably have a number of tech gadgets or something just kind of laying around. And for them, they're very used to this mode of communication. Mm-hmm. I'll also say for rural settings or for places where access to a mental health provider can be limited, this really opens things up. So as a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the state of North Carolina, I now have the ability to meet with anyone in the state. Whereas before, I could only meet with someone who'd be willing to drive to me. Now you just hop on the computer or whatever device you have and turn it on.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and as a parent and as a working professional, I will say one of the advantages for me is that the sessions take exactly an hour. Whereas
travel time
before, if it's okay, got to get to school to pick up kid. If we need the kid to be involved, drive to where the person is. It ends up being a 2-hour long process, that's really hard for me to take 2 hours out of my day, even if I know it's important.
I also think there are clients who would, I mean, and some of this is access in terms of can I actually get to the appointment, but I also think that there's access in terms of who might choose to seek out counseling. And there may also be clients who wouldn't seek it out if it meant going to an office, but are more willing and interested and able to engage in counseling, whether it's because of a particular struggle like social anxiety or just because of I'm super busy. I don't have time. There's other, barriers that might make in-person counseling more difficult.
Absolutely. I agree with you. There's one other thing to add there. I think you mentioned equity a bit ago. And in my experience, that has been true to some extent. There may be some clients who are looking for certain characteristics in their counselor. For example, looking for another Black counselor or a counselor who is identified as LGBTQ or whatever it is that you're looking for. Now you have more broad possibilities, more ability to find that specific person that you're looking for. So that's another thing that I think has come out of this. Sure. And that makes me really happy that is a benefit of doing telemental health counseling, because more folks that may have wanted access to different people in their area and may have had limited access now have more ability to get their needs met.
More access and more choice.
Yes, yeah. And choice.
it's worth pointing out that Dr. Fuenfhausen put a resource in our Canvas page today. Is it called A Therapist Like Me? That can help connect you to someone who can more easily relate to your lived experiences. So a couple things from the Q&A, drawing them in. First, kudos. Tommy Lineberger is pointing out that y'all are doing an excellent job of this normalization thing that you're talking about. You're walking the walk. Dr. Fisher, you as well, you're walking the walk of this normalization that's so critical to remove stigma surrounding mental health. So yay, awesome. And then Lee was wondering about mental health access through schools. So this is typically how kids receive mental health services. And so are kids going to be falling through the cracks? I have a dear friend who is a school counselor, and she's very, very concerned about this coming year. And let's see, I think it was Anne-Marie also asked a question. Sandra Klein asked about kids on the margins. These are the kids that she's worried about. Do you share that concern?
You want me to jump in? I do share the concern, and I am getting the sense that that may be one of the areas that schools have had a few months to prepare so that the fall semester can be different than the end of the spring semester. I will say that of our interns who are working in schools in the spring, some of them were able to continue offering phone or video sessions and check-ins with kids and families. There was at least one school in the area who said we cannot offer those services because we can't guarantee that all students have access to that. And so from that access and equity perspective, they were saying we're not offering it because we're not offering it to anyone because we can't guarantee that all students would have access to it. However, I think that now moving into the fall, a lot of school systems are making sure that students have iPads or other devices in order to do school, which they can also then use for student support services like school counseling, school social work, things like that. Do you have anything to add around that of what you're hearing is happening?
Yes, just one other thing that comes to mind. My sense as well is that there will be the ability to meet with counselors either on the phone or something like this, where video is involved. But the only thing that I think might be missing is that casual connection that you might have to your school counselor, that drop by type of thing where, the counselor is kind of a floater in a school and they walk around, they observe patterns, they know the students and they can high five, and they are able to pick up on differences in relationships, and they're really present in a school. And without that piece there, I think that some of that's going to be missed. And how else do you identify who might need to come in for a session without some of that there? Yeah. So I think that the school counselors and the support staff are really going to have to think creatively about how they will do this in upcoming sessions or semesters. What do schools call them? I guess it's quarters, I don't know, report periods. But at least for the first 9 weeks for several counties in our state, it's going to be virtual, or this split schedule, which I think, there's going to be, I don't even know how, that's a whole other conversation. We only have 15 minutes, but how they'll do that. But I do think that, I guess, short answer, there's going to be something missing, but we're all doing our best to make sure that there's something that students have, some support.
I wonder if we can, I'm sorry, Dr. Fuenfhausen, I kind of jumped in on you there.
That's okay, go ahead.
I was going to suggest maybe we can go to the other end of the spectrum from what we've talked about so far. We've got a couple of different people who have asked in the Q&A about this. Before I get there, though, we have an anonymous attendee who says, thank you for the Open Path resource. So wanted to let you know, give you the shout out for that. But Lee, or maybe Bridget, I'm not sure. It looks like we have someone who's logged in as lead, but the question assigned Bridget. I'm guessing 2 people watching on one account, which is awesome. And also Bob Blake or John Hall both asked about seniors in this crisis. So we've talked a lot about children and the gaps that we're going to have in their mental health needs and how we're going to fill them. Seniors, I think maybe, I'll admit I'm guilty of this. Like most of the seniors I know seem to have things probably more together than I do. And yet we know that that's not always true. And that especially depending on living situations, our seniors may have been experiencing isolation before the pandemic and now even more so. What can you say about how we can care for our seniors' mental health in this?
Yeah, I think that those are great questions. And you're right, it kind of depends on what their living situation is, what their social connections and support were prior to this. So in some ways I could, for some populations, I could imagine it not a lot has changed. I could also imagine a lot changing, and even if they are in a residential kind of facility, that visitors may be limited or not allowed now, or I don't have the benefit of having extended family and grandparents nearby, but among a lot of my friends who do have that, it's been several months of arguments with their parents about whether or not they can all get together, and if they do, are we socially distanced, are we masked, can we hug you? So I am certainly not going to offer a blanket, here's what the answer to that is, but I do think that within each family of weighing the risks and benefits of the mental health concerns with the physical health concerns. And then I also think that another way that we can support each other through this is to not judge decisions that other families make around that. So again, that I felt like that went a little tangential, but there was something else that popped into my head there about, I think just as we're looking for, I think across the lifespan, we're all looking for creative ways of connecting with other people. And so whether that's phone or Zoom sessions or I've joined a book club on Zoom with a few friends, and I've done some game nights. There's like Jackbox and I don't know if these existed before or if they've just like hit the jackpot with, we got to come up with some ways of helping people have some social interaction and connection. And there are ways of doing that. And I think we can do that with our parents and grandparents and older family members and friends too. I also think, writing hard copy snail mail letters is a lost art. And I've talked to a few people recently about journaling during this time. I mean, we're making history here. So journaling and writing letters not only can be a way of connection and a way of processing and reflecting on what we're experiencing, but also a way of documenting these unprecedented times.
I'm glad you mentioned that the full lifespan, because one of our anonymous attendees pointed out, and I think I appreciate the reminder on this, that seniors are not the only people who are dealing with the isolation, but singles are as well. There are plenty of people at all ages who are dealing with this. So I appreciate that. Anonymous attendee, thank you.
Lots of people in the Q&A are talking about loneliness. This is really, I think, hitting a chord for a lot of people at a time when it's so hard to feel connected. This goes back to what Dr. Lurs was talking about last week, is finding these opportunities for connection. Get them when we can.
Yeah, and I would also say that it overlaps with the struggle of depending on your family, job, parenting, what else is on your plate situation, finding time to be creative with finding a book club or a Zoom call, or finding time to fit that in when I'm trying to also fit a 40-hour work week around full-time childcare. You know, I mean, when am I supposed to do my book club? But I'm trying to squeeze it in. So I'm just, again, normalizing that it's hard to do.
So one thing that has come up already is I can't remember, was it Dr. Fuenfhausen or Dr. Hammonds? I just need to get out of my house. I'm just done being around these people, right? I could relate for sure.
Yes.
And Dr. Johnson, back in week 4, had us explore some Sartre and the idea that hell is other people. He explored that idea too. So maybe, so we've been talking about the positive side of social interaction so far. Can we turn to the dark side, to the negative side? What about people who are under the same roof who have different expectations for behaviors? So like to mask, to not mask. Mm-hmm. Can we go to the pool as a family or not? Like, it feels like this has been a particular source of tension. And I know both of you have experience with marriage and family counseling, couples counseling as well. How do we go through that? How do we navigate that? I'm asking for a friend and not for myself.
Discussion. That's the first thing that comes up in my mind is discussion, and trying to find, I don't know that there'll ever be a middle ground, but a place where both parties feel comfortable. Also, while recognizing that one of you or both of you will have to give up something and be uncomfortable with something. The other thing that I'll also acknowledge is, with this particular situation with the pandemic, I can see how it might feel more pressing to find a decision for the family, because one person's decision can really impact the entire family.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever you choose, I would think that it's important that all parties involved have a voice in those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that comes up for me, one of the frameworks that I use in couples counseling is called emotion-focused couples therapy. And without going into all the explanation of that theory, one of the pieces to it is that most of our arguments or conflict really isn't so much about the topic or the content as much as the emotions that are underlying it. So, I mean, the argument can be about who loads the dishwasher the right way. Really, in the overall scheme of things, I do. In the overall scheme of things, it really doesn't matter, right? But
it says top dish rack safe only. Only the top dish rack thing.
If you put them too close together, they're not going to get clean. Anyway, so the topic isn't so important, but if the way we communicate about that is in a way that leaves one partner feeling constantly critiqued or attacked, or like I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it right, and that's a theme in the relationship, then it's really kind of more the communication style than the content that you're. So I would say in this case, it would benefit family members to think about how the other person is feeling, and to try to put yourself in their shoes and to try to empathize. And we teach reflective listening skills in counseling programs, but I teach them to clients too, to say, when you're in some kind of conflict, to say, wow, here's what I'm hearing you say. It sounds like this is really scary to you. So rather than it be an I'm right, you're wrong kind of a communication, more so of let's empathize and understand what's driving our emotional reaction to this, and how can we support each other in and try to work as a team against this struggle that we're having, rather than against each other.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great, really
sounds good. Now we've got to go do it, right? That's the hard part. And I mean, it strikes me that what you're talking about is in some ways very much what we're experiencing at a broader cultural level as well, which is that it sounds good to say we just need to talk through all these issues and figure out what to do. That's hard to do. And one of the things that's particularly challenging with right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, it's a question that I had, and I think Maxie in the Q&A has raised this as well. My parental instinct with my kids kicks in and says, keep them in the house, do not let them out the doors, and keep them healthy. And yet for their mental health, that may not be a good thing. We've really kind of struggled this summer letting my 16-year-old have a job at a grocery store, saying health risk, but the mental health benefit and the life skills benefit, we're weighing those. How do we do that as a culture? And what do you see as the, especially with getting kids back to school, that's their social space. We know that they need that. That's a crucial part of their development, right? And yet, there's always an and balance. Yet. How do you see us balancing that? And how do you see those conversations? How can we have those conversations? And we're gonna have to do that one in a fairly quick time frame because we've only got 3 minutes left. So all the right answers from Dr. Hammonds and Dr. Fuenfhausen in 3 minutes. Go.
I'll just say that I don't know that there are any short or easy answers to a question like that. I wish I could just wave a magic wand. I can solve all of the problems. However, I think that it's because of probably systemic issues. Our schoolhouses have become the place where children get their needs met outside of the home. They get food, they get, socialization, they get so many things, music lessons, and all these things that we're depending on schools for. And here we are in a situation where now we're stuck feeling like, well, without that one piece, our children don't get their needs met. Now, I don't know what that says about our broader society, whether we should be depending on schools for all of those things or not, but here we are. But I guess I'll say it's an individual family's choice, and to really think about what's important to them, what's important to their child, their family. I don't know, Dr. Fuenfhausen.
I also don't have any blanket answers. I think that it's a cost-benefit analysis for each family, and if there are any physically high-risk folks in the family, and the age of the kids. And I'll again self-disclose here that in late May, our kids had been home since middle of March. In late May, we got a call that said, hey, we had been on a wait list for a daycare for over this particular daycare for over a year. We got a call that said, hey, we can take Ollie June 1st. And I wish I could say that we thought long and hard about it, but it was a pretty quick answer, honestly, because I'm kind of being kidding about that. We did think about it, but we knew that and I even said to my friends and family, I don't know that this is a great decision COVID wise, but it is absolutely a great decision mental health wise for our family. He's a little tornado and I love him and he's wonderful. And I'm a better parent when I'm not with him 24/7. So, so that's my, I still don't know if it was the right call, but we're all a little happier and he's happier, and we don't have super high physical risk to consider in our immediate family, and we're doing a bunch of other things with masking and social distancing and limiting other contacts that we have. So I also think that there's some trade-offs in the choices that we make.
It occurs to me that grace is beneficial both ways, right? Giving someone grace also is good for you too, because then you're not doing whatever happens in your own head when you're not doing Yeah.
I feel like it sounds like I don't love my kids here, and I need to
No, it does not at all.
I've got one too.
all those things.
So I will observe here as kind of a wrapping up of this session, because we are at 8 o'clock, that our final session, the title of this whole course was a liberal arts exploration of the coronavirus pandemic. And I don't think counseling is typically seen as being a liberal art. At least at Lenore Ryan, it's housed in one of our professional schools. And yet you've left us with exactly what we think of the liberal arts as doing, which is raising lots of questions, pushing us to think hard, and not necessarily saying we've got all the answers. That this is part of that being human struggle. And I think Tommy Lineberger pointed to that in one of the comments, and I think that's a great place for us to end kind of the official 10-week chunk. So Dr. Fuenfhausen and Dr. Hammonds, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Newton, any final words from you?
Words of wisdom from a friend. She keeps saying, everything feels like either a complete overreaction or a complete underreaction, and it's hard to find the middle place. And so I think that ties in nicely with the observation that you just had, Dr. Fisher, the humanness of it all, and we're all trying to figure it out together.
Good. And we'll keep trying, and hope to see some of you next week to join in with us in that trying in a little bit more of a personal sense than we've been able to do in the webinars. So thank you all very much.
Thanks for having us.